everyone. We are back in this beautiful setup. I'm really excited to do my August reading wrap up. So crazy to me that we are already in August. We have 4 months left of the year, which is literally insane. As for my reading goal, I am not even halfway. I think 200 was a little bit ambitious. I might have to edit it. I think I'm going to get to the end of December and then kind of decide if I'm going to edit that reading goal, because I don't see myself reading 100 books in the next 4 months. Also, this month for me was incredibly slumpy. Even though I read 13 books, most of the books are like 3 stars, 2 stars. Like, there wasn't a lot of books that I was like really excited about continuing reading until the end of the month. So it was definitely hard. I was definitely slumpy for a while. And I think I definitely could have read more if I was more excited about reading. So I read 13 books and then 1 DNF, so 14. So let's get into talking about them. Okay, so the first book I read was a 5 stars. So we started off with a bang, and that is Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. I am obsessed with this book. It's a thriller, and it's such a unique concept for a thriller. But I also love the romance in this, and I love how it's almost like not a coming of age, but like a finding yourself inspirational kind of book as well. I cried 3 separate times, which I've never cried reading a thriller before. So it's just so powerful and beautiful, and I highly recommend. Holly Jackson, like, I loved 5 Survived by her, and I loved the first book in the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, but the other 2 books were not really my favorite. So I was kind of nervous going in, but I really like this, and I definitely want to read The Reappearance of Rachel Price now to see how I feel about all of her books, but I really loved this. Then I read August Blue by Deborah Levy. I gave this a 3 stars strictly for the writing. I think the writing was really beautiful. However, this was a character-driven book, which I typically don't love, so there was not a lot of plot, and it moved very slowly. And then my main thing about this book is I felt like the whole time I was reading it, there was something that was like underlying in the text, like some sort of theme or message that I was completely missing. Like, do you ever watch a movie and you're like, I feel like this movie is supposed to be telling me something specific and I'm just not getting it? Because that's how I felt reading this book. So it was good. Like, it was very well written. I just felt like I didn't get out of it what I should have gotten out of it. Okay, then I listened to the audiobook of This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. I gave this a 3.5 stars. The writing was great, and so was August as a character. I really loved August. For me, the world building was a little bit confusing. It wasn't until about halfway through the book when I finally started to get it, and maybe that's just a me thing, but I don't love it when the world is confusing. And also for me, I feel like there wasn't enough action or plot going on. Like, yes, there was this underlying plot, but I feel like a lot of it was just like them at school or like them meeting each other and talking. Like, I feel like the plot didn't really happen until like the last 30% of the book, which, you know me, I'm a plot girly, so I felt like I was missing out on some like plot or action or something. It felt a lot like set up for book 2. I think I'm going to still continue the series. I was just pretty frustrated by that. And then I read Morwood Family Rules by Helen K. DeMond. This one I was pleasantly surprised by. I gave it a 4 stars. It was super easy to fly through. It was entertaining. It was funny. I actually genuinely really enjoyed this book. And I think it was really nice after, having a 3-star read to just kind of have that as a nice book that I enjoyed. Then I listened to the audiobook of Passion Project by London Sperry, I believe is the author. I gave this a 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this a lot. I loved Barrett, and I related a lot to her character. There were a couple choices she made that I thought were pretty questionable, which is why this is not a perfect 5, but I adored the relationship, and I loved just the New York setting, and I don't know why, it just felt like a classic go-to rom-com that I would watch in my room in the dark. Then I did a reread of Once More with Feeling by Alyssa Sussman. I'm trying to read a lot of my standalones right now because my philosophy is if I'm not going to reread the book a lot, then I don't really want it on my shelf. I'm trying to be more sustainable in my book collecting, and so I don't want books to just sit and collect dust if I'm never going to pick them up again. So I've been picking up some books that I haven't read in a while and rereading them and see if they're worth keeping and if there's something I'm going to reread again. So I picked up Once More with Feeling. I gave this book a 5 stars the first time that I read it, and the second time I gave it a 3. Kathleen really annoyed me in this book. She was very diva-ish, low-key kind of rude, was not a fan of that. And then I don't know why, but the first time I read this, I must have like overlooked the cheating thing, because I normally hate that in books. Like, it's an instant like star lowering for me, and I guess I just overlooked it in this one and just assumed it was okay. So I didn't love that either, but I did love that it was like a Broadway setting, because I feel like we don't often get books about Broadway or romances surrounding Broadway, so it was nice to kind of get that theater kid representation. I did like that, but I ended up giving it a 3 stars. I think I'm probably gonna unhaul it because I don't see myself rereading it again in the foreseeable future. Okay, so then I attempted to read Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, and I DNF'd it at about 40% because I could already tell that it was going to be another character-driven, slow-moving book. And I was like, I've read so many of those this month, and I've already had like a slumpy month, so I was like, this is going to put me in a slump if I keep reading it. So I will say I soft DNF'd it because I could definitely see myself picking it up again in the foreseeable future, but I was just like, right now in this month that we're in, don't really think it's going to happen. Then I listened to an audiobook called Big Girl. I cannot remember the author's name, but it will be on the screen. And I chose this audiobook because Chloe Ament, one of my favorite singers, read it and enjoyed it. So I was like, I should try it. So that was like my move-in audiobook that I listened to while I was like moving all my stuff and packing up and everything. Another character-driven, slow-moving book. So I gave this one a 3 because the writing was good and it was very vivid. I wasn't like super interested because I felt like there wasn't really a plot going on. I did appreciate like the last kind of like 20% of the book when you kind of see that independence kind of start to come in, and sort of that aspect I did like. But again, I was disappointed. Like I said, this was a slumpy month. I read a lot of just like mid books. In an attempt to save my reading slump, I picked up Maybe This Once by Sophie Sullivan on NetGalley, and it did not save anything. I ended up giving this book a 2.5 stars. The reason I gave it 2.5 stars is I thought that the romance pacing was all off. Basically, within like the first few chapters, their romance kind of gets going. There's not a lot of build-up, and I was like, whoa, okay. Maybe I'm just used to slow burns, but it felt very soon. And then I felt like there wasn't much of a plot after that, because I was like, well, they're already like essentially in love. Like, they weren't officially together, but like, yeah. I did really like the campsite kind of setting, and I did like reading about the family. I guess it's not really a campsite. I don't really know what to call it. It's like a lodge, so it gives kind of camp vibes. And I liked reading about like the family and kind of those elements, but I felt like the romance was really rushed. And then I also just felt like the dialogue was so juvenile for an adult romance book. Like, there were moments where I was like literally cringing. I was like, I cannot believe that they just said that. And so that was a huge turnoff for me as well. So I ended up giving that a 2.5. But you know what did save my reading slump? Old reliable Frida McFadden. I read The Tenant by Frida McFadden. I gave this a 4 stars. I read it in one singular sitting. I hated the male narrator, but I think that was kind of the point. Like, I think you were supposed to hate his character. And I did predict kind of one part of the twist. So it was a 4, but it did get me out of my slump. Like, it made me excited to read. So Miss Old Reliable is at it again, saving me from my drought of just hating every book that I read. Okay, so then I read Swiped by Paula Rogers, and I actually really liked this. I gave this a 4.5. I loved the two, like the couple together. I think that they were literally so adorable. And this is one of those books that just like makes me excited to be in love and excited to go on dates. I love romance books that are like that, and this was definitely one of them. Like, the vibes were just perfect. And then the next book that I picked up was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I was so scared to read this because I thought it would put me back in a reading slump, but it didn't. I actually really enjoyed this. I gave it a 4.25 just because at the beginning it was a little bit hard to like understand kind of the hierarchy of the women specifically in the world and just kind of like how the world worked, like each woman's role kind of thing. So that was a little bit hard for me to understand, and it was a little bit overly descriptive, but only at the beginning. I really liked Margaret Atwood's writing. I was very invested in the storyline. I think that this is such a powerful book to read right now. And I'm doing like a little side quest this year where I'm trying to read as many banned books as possible, and this one is definitely one that you need to check out. It's so freaking good. I loved this book. So perfect. The best choice. Speaking of perfect books, I did a reread of The 7-Year Slip. I am obsessed with this book, you guys. I think this makes like top 10 favorite romance books of all time. It's beautifully written. The romance is so sentimental and just real and deep, and I love it. But I also love Clementine's story and just her learning to overcome grief and her learning to accept change and find her passions and her joys in life. It's just, it speaks to me in so many ways, and I feel this book so deeply. So it was such a refreshing read. A lot of people associate this book with summer. I have no idea why, but I associate this book with fall. And so reading this book just made me really excited for fall and the fall weather and just all of that coming in. Then I read Flashback by Shannon Messenger, the 7th book in the Keeper of the Lost Cities series. I cannot believe that I've committed this long to a series. Normally I'm like a 3 to 4 book series kind of girl. I don't do long series. They're not my favorite, but this one I really like. This book definitely was slower moving. I gave it a 3.5. I feel like there was minimal action. It was a lot of just like them talking and info dumping and like finding out information and like reporting back to each other, which is interesting for some, but for me, it just wasn't my favorite. And also, this book very heavily emphasized a specific ship that I do not like. And so I just, every time it was on the page, I was like, ugh, no. And my favorite character, Keith, was like not in this one as much. So that is why I gave it a 3.5. But all in all, towards the end of the month, we kind of saved that slump, which I appreciate. So those are all of the books that I read this month. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss any more videos from me. Check out my social medias in the description box below, and I will see you guys in my next video.